Hello, everybody. I'm really lucky today. I've got Mogg here to talk to us today. I've been a follower of his work for a long time. We've met a couple of times in the past. I've got his book, Seth and the Two Ways. Yeah. And I've got some of your other work from when you've written in articles or PDFs, which obviously I can't show on here like that. But Mogg's been involved in many various magical workings and such like, and I follow him on his Facebook page with all your Egyptology little posts that you put up and what day it is of the year in the Egyptology calendar. So thanks for coming along, Mogg.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
And
I
wanted to
talk about set and stuff as well.
Yes. Well, I wanted to ask you a question, actually, or start off with a bit of a deep question, I suppose. With all this chaos that's been happening in the last few years, has Seths risen?
Has Seth risen? I think. Well, you'll have to tell me why you think that might be the case as well. I usually talk about that I think Seth is emerging, has been emerging since the 1960s, really, into popular consciousness and into the magical world. So whether there's another issue, but certainly since the 1960s. I mean, obviously it was mentioned before. Say, for instance, as you know, I'm quite interested in Aleister Crowley, and so people say, well, it's not very noticeable in Crowley. You have to really dig around to find even the odd reference to him. It does mention him. I mean, that's a long time ago, so it obviously wasn't really on his radar, because otherwise I think he would have made it more central to his point of view. But it is there, but basically, certainly in the 1960s or the end of the 1960s, 1970s, there's this kind of revival took place, I suppose. A revival in interest in Crowley, but also this. I mean, initially this interest in, I suppose you'd call it countercultural Satanism. Really, Satanism got kind of hip. Sort of, right? Although Anton LaVey and his Church of Satan and everything like that, and his amazing book, which was a sort of bestseller, the Satanic Bible, that kind of came out. And so obviously people think, oh, well, that's right. But that wasn't very religious in a way, or spiritual. It was kind of more like a countercultural thing, a political thing in a way. But it was interesting that that's obviously, but it sort of opened a door, and people within that organization kind of thought, well, actually, well, by some couple of different synchronicities, they were introduced to this idea of this sort of neglected deity called Seth. And there were a couple of academic books published and stuff, and so it was obviously in the air. And suddenly they realized, actually, we weren't really into all that satanic stuff. Or it wasn't, it was getting us somewhere, but this is really this is more interesting in a way. This is what we want. So it kind of emerged into the consciousness in a couple of different places at once, which is a weird thing. So that's what you say about the spirit of the age and stuff. It emerged in America in the Templar Set, and famously it emerged in the writings of Kenneth Grant, who kind of rewrote the whole of Aleister Crowley, really, in the image, and gave it an interpretation, calling it the Typhonian sort of current, if you like, and Typhon being another name for Seth. So I don't think they really knew about, these two groups knew about each other, or at least their influences were different. But it's funny how both, or virtually in the same year, they both come up with this idea. Which was a pretty good idea, really. But at first, it's kind of, when you look at the early stuff, well, actually, if you look at the Kenneth Grant, apart from talking about the names and everything and the emergence, he doesn't really give you very much detail. He relies an awful lot on his Victorian material, some of which is very, very interesting, and some of which is kind of a bit old-fashioned now, I think. So he kind of opens the door, and the same with the Templar Set. At first, they were, I don't know, it was a particular type of, they were a bit too close, maybe, I think, to the the Church of Satan was a little bit kind of, I say countercultural, but it was also, they were very opposed to all the 60s, the swinging 60s stuff. They really didn't like the swinging 60s.
All the hippies.
They didn't, they were anti the hippies and everything, weren't they, and drugs and all this other stuff. They were quite conservative, or more than conservative in some ways, which is weird. I find that weird in a way, because you'd think Seth, when you get to know about Seth, you realize he probably would be into, well, he'd definitely be into sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but at first, so I think at first they were from that, but working with the archetype, if you like, this is interesting. It's almost like it is real. It sort of changes all the people who are involved with him, and it kind of says, well, okay, we'll open a few more doors. I'll give you a bit. As you find out more about it, you realize some of those old attitudes are not right. So yeah, there's this thing about whether, I suppose, to get to your thing, is Seth sort of revolutionary in some way? Right? Is that what you think is happening at the moment? Are we in the middle of a revolution or something?
Yeah, that's what
I don't know.
happening.
I always think it is. Yeah, well, or is it the end of the world type thing? It's true that Seth historically is very connected with apocalypses and stuff, isn't it? Really, all this battle between Horus and Seth, it's got it often, because in politics, people like to have a kind of icon to represent them, to represent a particular political moment. And because the Egyptians were always dreaming of getting rid of the Greeks and the Romans and the Persians and going back to how it used to be, the good old days when they had their own native kings, and also, so they're always plotting and dreaming of revolution. But I mean, often it was the other way around. They kind of thought that the enemy was Seth in a way. But I think probably that whatever, it's the opposition between Horus and Seth is about changing the established order. There's definitely a political aspect to it. So yeah, I mean, maybe in the kind of demonic calendar thing I kind of post, just as a sort of exercise in synchronicity, I think. I've got this revised version of the Egyptian demonic calendar. I give it this weird old name. I'm not sure if anybody kind of completely accepts this yet, but I will get in there. But to sort of illustrate this, as the cycle of cosmic cycles move on, I often post stuff that seems to fit with what I see in the news and whatever. And it is obviously when bad things are happening in Egypt, and they say, oh, Seth or Apophis or whatever is causing a lot of trouble again, So I don't know, but do you really feel that? It's funny, on the internet and all this, a lot of people are kind of thinking about, oh, it's the end of the world or something.
Yeah, I was kind of going through that a bit myself.
Are you an optimist or a pessimist? See, I'm quite optimistic. I think, yeah, the situation with, I suppose the thing that might be on people's mind, it's funny, isn't it, with this, suddenly in Europe, we're kind of involved in this conflict that came out of nowhere, really, I think. Whatever people say, I don't think anybody was really expecting it. There's always lots of hot air and everything, but suddenly out of nowhere comes this conflict, and people are making all these really big sort of threatening noises, especially for Britain's going to get blown up and we're 3 bombs and we'll all be dead or something like that. They keep telling us. It's funny because there is a sense of unrealism about it. I don't know about you. It doesn't feel, we ought to be kind of scared, I suppose, but we're not, are we? I don't think there's a sort of feeling of being scared. It's like, oh, nobody takes anything seriously anymore. Also, which is just as well, right? I mean, probably that's what you have to do. I think, yeah, they've made all these terrible weapons and everything that they're kind of threatening each other with.
Do you think they're trying to give us chaos through that by making us all feel chaotic and disturb our harmonies?
Well, I guess so. I mean, there's a lot of bad things. Obviously, we've had the plague. This would be a very the plague of the COVID plague, if you like, as a thing everybody was predicting that was going to happen. That's always very connected with people like Seth and also Hathor and Sekhmet, it has to be said. You know, they're kind of connected. This Set is born in this kind of period of time when it is a sort of chaotic time in between one world and the other. It's not that whole generation of gods, the Isis and Osiris, Set and Nephthys, they're not really supposed to be born. You know, it's according to the mythology, it's a kind of, there's 360 days in the year, and that's it. And you know, it's this kind of story that Nuit and Geb, the earth god, they have sex, right? They like having sex, and they're kind of having sex. They don't stop, right? They won't stop, and everybody's getting on everybody's nerves in heaven or wherever it is. They say, "All right, I'll tell you what, I'll shut them up. They can have as much sex as they like, but they're never going to have any children." And I say, "Well, that would be so bad, really." But they say, "Yeah, no child of yours is going to be born on any day during the year," is the curse. And so somehow or other they managed to say, "Oh, I'll tell you what, we'll make an extra 5 days. We sort of squeeze the year apart, this chaotic time." And on those 5 days, as you'd forgotten about, these 5 gods are going to be born, including the god Set, and these are cursed entities, really, born in between the one world and the other. And Set is the primary one of those. And it's funny how that time we were in Egypt was a very much connected with plagues and apocalypses, and anything bad was going to happen. If it was going to happen in Egypt, it would happen then. So yeah, I guess that's if you know, well, people are always saying we're saying this in the ancient world, right? The thing you get in the book of Revelation and all this sort of stuff. There are loads of examples of that sort of stuff. People are always predicting that it's the end of the world, and sometimes they're right.
They are at the moment. I suppose I think it's kind of a big change. It's because Gurdjieff and Steiner both predicted that the next 100 years would be pivotal on a change for humanity and whether we'll go up or down. And for that, they said there would be chaos. So it's like, you know, if Set's chaos. Though I did want to just clarify, Set's not a war god, is he? Because I've had many people, well, not many, a few people say to me, "Oh, that's what's happening. That's why there's war." But Set's not a war god, is he? He's just a god of chaos.
I think he does have a military side. He's in some, depends who you read there, but in something he's the emanation of the sun god, and he emanates him in order to do heavy duty things, really, to protect him, really. So he's the most aggressive of the gods, and probably not solely such, but he does have this role, this kind of violent role of well, really, you've got this other, his kind of alter ego, I suppose you could say, Apophis, who really is the force of chaos.
He's normally depicted as a big snake, right? Yeah.
Big snake, right? That has to be. This is Seth's primary role in existence, is to deal with this snake for Ra, because for some reason Ra, even though he's supposed to be the creator, this is an odd paradox with this sort of mythology, is not able to deal with it. And there are all sorts of speculations about why that is the case, that he has to emanate this other deity to do it. So it could be that Set is the kind of does that through aggression, but there you go, you've got the forces of chaos that always coming up, and Apophis comes into existence at a time in Egypt when it really was like what you might be hinting at, where things were falling apart and where there was famine and war, and people were not happy with the social system. And so this personification probably had existed before, became very important, which is Apophis, and at the same time they have to have another deity who's very similar to kind of keep it at bay, really, to try and stop it happening. So there's definitely this struggle. between the two. Whether it's because, so I think it would be fair comment to say he has an aggressive side. Whether that's the reason he can deal with Apophis, there's another possibility that when Apophis, the god of chaos, absolute evil chaos, if you like, appears, as he does on a regular basis, then, you know, why you need someone to do it. What is it? All the other gods and goddesses, even though they're gods and goddesses, they're kind of paralyzed by this. You know, they can't face it, which is, again, it's an interesting phenomenon to say that they can't look at it. And literally, in terms of magic, they say that because Apophis puts the evil eye on them, he hypnotizes them, fake news and all that sort of stuff. The Apophis, that's his thing. He can, if you look at him, he kind of hypnotizes you and you can't move. And there's only one. Yeah, that's a very serpentine thing. And the evil eye is a very important thing. So there's only one entity, one supernatural entity who can cope with the evil eye, and that's Seth. He's not fazed by it. And as I suppose you might speculate why is he immune to that sort of thing? And people say because he's that like it himself. He is chaos. So yeah, no, I think you're right. It's the time. So it's funny how it's been building up since the 60s. But yeah, maybe we are. I don't think. I think with the situation we're in now politically, because as I say, Seth is it is very involved with politics. The Sethian thing, it's magic. It's very much involved with magic, but it's very connected with the political situation and keeping things going. And you know, he does have a role in keeping things going. But there's always, like I say in the book, there's always two ways that things might go. So even though the situation with, say the situation now, right? And I know a lot about this, but say it struck me the situation with the conflict with Russia and the war with Russia and kind of this really unusual war that they've started that kind of shocked everybody, really, that it also, there's the possibility that things might get better as a result of it. You know, if they were defeated, or, you know, for Russia itself, right, for the people of Russia, to not be led into these things, they might actually. So it could go either way. It could either get really, really bad, or it could be a wake-up call. It could finally, maybe things could get better there. So I think there was always the case of, you probably know politics and everything, so they always used to say socialism or barbarism. They always say there's always two ways. There's always two ways. There's a very Sethian view. It can look as if it might probably gonna get bad, and usually does, catastrophic, but there's always a possibility that it might actually be better. You know, with this, that would be the Egyptian thing, that the tension is a very creative thing, the tension between Set and Apophis and all these different chaotic forces actually enables progress to take place, but it's risky stuff.
So it's like the chaos, like you say, is bringing all them tensions out, but that tension needs to be dealt with, and then something better will come from it, hopefully. Something better might come. I hope so. Because you was talking about Crowley. I'm very into Crowley as well. I've got a few Crowley videos on my channel as well. I like Crowley. And he was trying to bring in the age of Horus. So I'm wondering if someone perhaps, you know, I'm not saying who, because I don't know, but has someone tried to bring in the age of Seth or Seth? Well, I don't know. If you read Crowley's, this is sort of very debated at the moment. Crowley, I don't know, I don't know to take him that seriously, but still, he got this channeled book, right, the Book of the Law, and it's got it's got a goddess, and then it's got sort of two. Horus has two goes, doesn't he? He's in the second book and the third book, essentially. So this was why the idea came of the Typhonian interpretation, to say it's actually
it's not double Horus, it's Horus and Set. It's a double current. They're both there. And when you think of it that way, actually, if even you look in Crowley stuff, it sort of makes sense, really, that the two because as Horus is more of an icon of both together. The conflict between Horus and Set playing that's a very, very important dynamic, really. It's kind of it's eternal. It's been, according to mythology, been going on since the Stone Ages. So I think I'm one of these people who it doesn't completely think it's the Age of Horus. I mean, Crowley, as you probably know, he had a kind of a disciple, a magical son, who he kind of thought, oh, wow, at last I've found someone, because everybody would love to do that, find someone who really understands what I'm on about. And he came up with this reinterpretation. He said, we can't have 2,000 years of the Aeon of Horus, because there's really no world left, because it's so warlike. Horus is very much to do with kind of much more of a warlike figure than Seth is in lots of ways. Maybe he's had a kind of go. We've had, because they all coincided with, they had 2 world wars and all sorts of conflicts around the world. They say maybe Horus has done his bit now, and it's time for somebody else to have a go, which is the Aeon of the goddess Maat, who is so it's more about social justice, really. And Crowley kind of wasn't particularly opposed to that idea, I don't think. I mean, obviously, you come up with this whole thing, and he didn't want him to chuck it out after 30 years. Thought maybe give it a bit more time. But he did make the point that, yeah, I can see what you're getting at, but look at the world around us. It's still full of war and conflicts and, things like now. Like 5 years ago, we'd think the world was sort of getting better in a way, the sort of slight poverty was going down a little bit, and then more people were getting democracies, and there weren't so many dictators and all that sort of stuff. But it seems to have start to get bad again now, really. But I think that's what Crowley would say. So I think it might be. I think you've got to have both of them. That's my solution. That's the setting solution. You have it's the Age of Horus and Set, and they both uphold. They're both interested in this entity Maat, social justice in some way. That's what that unites them. But it's true. I don't think the world could cope with 2,000 years of the Age of Horus. Really, I think we'd be blown to bits.
Maybe 2,000 years quiet. Of lovely truth and self and justice. I think a lot of people still want to see social justice occurring.
Social justice is always there.
I can't quite reach it, but yeah. So, but I quite go to the British Museum a lot and other museums, and there's a lot of depictions of, like you say, Set and Horus next to each other, and sometimes it's the Jed pillar between them, and sometimes I'm not sure what this other thing is. It looks like they're twisting around. Do you know what I mean? The piece that I mean? So it looks like they work together.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's this very, I don't know if that's quite a rare thing, I think, but it probably is one in the British Museum. But certainly they're often shown as the 2 deities, and they kind of, which I was always very struck by this. There's this sort of thing between them, which it's not obvious what it is. There's actually a pair of lungs and a windpipe. Not, as a symbol. They've taken the symbol of the lungs and the windpipe and placed that between the image of Horus and Set. And it's not that that's someone's lungs and windpipe that's being kind of ripped out or something. I don't care.
It's a symbol.
It's the breath. It's the symbol of the breath that unites these 2 opposing forces. So that I see that as quite a yogic thing, really. Or if 2 entities can breathe together in coordination with each other, that's what unifies them. It's the breath that unifies them. And then the other thing they have is this, because that's a symbol of the unity of the whole of Egypt and the whole of the world, really. But and then you have these kind of knot, like these two emblematic plants that form this kind of knotwork design. One is the papyrus, and one is the blue lily, which is that's the plant, the symbolic plant of the god Set, and papyrus is the plant of the god Horus, and so that they represent two bits of Egypt that are kind of woven together. You need both of them, but as it happens as well, Horus, as we know, Set's plant is a narcotic. So it's not a very strong one, incidentally. Not as I've discovered so far, but it's got certain qualities to it. But it is a narcotic that the Egyptians are very into, and it is interesting that Seth's emblematic plant is this narcotic thing. And when you realize the image is everywhere in Egypt, along with the papyrus, the two things. So he represents that kind of have fun type aspect, I think, within Egyptian.
Well, he's a hippie, really.
The hippie bit, but you need both of them. That's I suppose what it's kind of hinting at. It's probably not. Well, I suppose for a pagan, it's easy to think we don't really want one of anything. One god, whoever it is, male or female, one of anything, it always leads to trouble. Pluralism is better. It's better to have a diversity of things, and that politically, that would be a very Sethian point of view, actually, in terms of politics, that they're into. But people say, "Oh, he's confused. He's all about confusion," but really, he's about plurality, about the fact, don't have one person in charge like Horus. Just put Horus in charge for too long, it'll drive everybody mad.
So like different voices. He's suggesting we need a committee.
you need to kind of bit of a mix. In fact, in the old Sethians, in the prehistory, I think there's an indication that they meant male and female as well. That society is better when it's run by a kind of joint, the theme of the two ways, by a man, a male king and a queen, but both of the same status and both running things. And of course, people, they don't like that idea, really. They think it's weak. It looks weak if you've got two people, like a dual leadership of some sort. That they think, you're going to have one strong person that tells everybody what to do.
I think that's a reflection of their own life, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there you go. But that's grained into us, we kind of think. Probably again with the Russian stuff, that's probably just think about Putin. Putin's this strong man, isn't he? One strong man who, whatever you think about him, he kind of knows he seems to know what he wants. And he's very definite about it, and that seems initially attractive. Or we've got Boris Johnson and everything, one person or something. But the idea of saying, there's a bunch of us kind of hippies who kind of work it out in a different way. People say, nothing will get done, but actually everything gets done like that. I think it's better in the end.
And also having a man and a woman would be the male and female energies would probably, you're coming from two different sides of thinking and feeling, a feminine and a masculine.
Yeah, I think you need both. I think that's true. I mean, some people say, maybe the world would be less violent if it was run by women. When you do get women running as head of state in certain countries, they say, it seems better life there, really. But I don't know if that's.
I don't know. There's some egotistical women out there.
we've got Margaret Thatcher and we got Indira Gandhi as two kind of counter examples, I suppose. But maybe diversity is plurality, and these are all Sethian ideas, at least trying to think that, things are not being too certain about anything. That's the best way, I reckon.
Well, in the British Museum, I'm sure it's on on the Sekhmet by Dr. D. That is where I've seen the Seth
What is that?
Horus.
A Sekhmet by Dr. D?
Yeah, where the Dr. D mirrors are, they've got a big giant Sekhmet. And
Really?
she's on this, it's this where I've seen it, it's on the side of her. I'm sure it's on there. I'm gonna have to go and check. I'm going there Wednesday in case I've got the wrong one. But there is, so she's sitting there and the Dr. D mirrors are here, but down her side, down here, is where Horus and Seth are, like you said, doing the lung and windpipe, turning it. And I thought it was quite weird that it was on a Sekhmet.
Well, as you say, Sekhmet, earlier form of Sekhmet would be Hathor, and yeah, you kind of think you wouldn't, but I think there is this secret relationship between Hathor and Seth. You know, it seems, I think maybe because they're kind of like an ex relationship or something, you know. But there's that sort of energy to them in sort of mythology. But if you go back long, because they're so similar in character, but one's male version, one's both associated with gold. They're both associated with the sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing, with alcohol and pleasures of the flesh and sexuality and music and dancing and stuff. They're both associated with them, but at the same time, she has this very violent manifestation in Sekhmet. So yeah, no, I'd really love to see you must take a picture then.
Yeah, I will on Wednesday and I'll send it to you. But I did want to, I wonder what you think Seth's Head is, because I think it's a creature that's perhaps now extinct myself. Though some people say it's a jackal. I don't think it's that. Others have told me it's a donkey. It doesn't quite look right. What do you think on Seth's headpiece or whatever it is, the animal head that he's got?
Well, there's something dangerous probably. Would be the bottom line. I mean, sometimes it's obvious what his head is. It's because one of his important avatars. Then he's got lots of different avatars. They're all kind of a bit unusual. All the animals that are used to represent Seth are, as I say, they often are dangerous, or they've got something special about them. So even if he's a fish, this would be the same for the other gods and goddesses. They have a fish avatar. There always will be a fish that fish won't be just some ordinary fish. It will be an electric fish or a catfish, if you like. So Seth's fish avatar is a catfish, and he's also a hippo, which is about the most violent animal in Africa. And yeah, more people get killed by that than anything. So it's pretty. That's the kind of violent side to him. So then you've got this strange, what you're referring to as the Seth animal, which is the one they don't know what it is. In some cases, it's rather strange, rather funny. People say it looks like an aardvark. They say, well, an aardvark. I don't really know much about aardvarks, but apparently they are quite special creatures as well. And in some depictions of the Seth animal, it does look a little bit more that way. But it's some sort of combination, isn't it, of, well, of course, a donkey. The donkey is very, very ancient, like really, really old. Even before Egypt was a monarchy, the people were making sand sculptures, pictograms in the desert and stuff, images of the donkey. And even the donkey isn't, donkeys are kind of quite wonderful animals, really, but but you don't they've got there's something about their characteristic about donkeys. They're very, very clever, and they can be quite stroppy and sort of whatever, stick up for themselves. But so you've got this other creature that is obviously not meant. It can't be a real biological animal, or at least if it is, it's got certain features that you wouldn't really associate with other sort of known species or whatever. It's got this sort of strange tail, which is not animal tail. It's kind of almost like a piece of flint attached to it and stuff. So yeah, I don't know what that animal is. I think that's the intention. I think the Egyptians did kind of that's what they were doing. It is a magical animal. It's a combination of other creatures. It's not a real species.
Like a chimera or something.
It's like a chimera. Yeah, well, it cost a griffin, and that's another Settian creature. This is a sort of monstrous thing. It's a monster, and the thing about monsters is they're really, really interesting once you can, as long as they're not going to get you. You know, they're kind of if you just think about them intellectually. People have been making images of monsters for a long time, and they must have known that they weren't. They sit right next to drawings of things that you can recognize. Say, oh, well, that's a horse, or that's a bison, or whatever, and then right in the middle of it, it'll be this kind of monstrous thing, usually a goat on a human body, or sort of the goat demon and stuff like this. So I think it's in that the image you're talking about is in that class of things, and it's there to make you think. It's there to drive you into thinking of it in a more psychological way, because that's the weird thing. That's a nice thing or interesting thing about Seth. He's about psychology, really, rather than about kind of just human archetypes of the king, the queen, and the mother, father. He's something else, right? He's this kind of well, the weird thing is what the monster is us.
Hopefully you was going to say that.
The main monster, the worst monster on the planet is us, isn't it, really? And Seth is very associated with human beings. You know, you're talking about Sekhmet and you know, her famous story where she almost kills everybody, doesn't she? She goes again at bonkers and stuff because of the insult to her father, the sun god. She kind of thinks, oh, well, fuck them, you know, I'm going to eat them all. I'm going to completely trash them all and kill them all. And I'm just going to, she gets completely full of blood and goes, you know, bloodlust and everything. It's just, and even he thinks, the father thinks, well, you can go a bit far, you know, and they think of some way to distract her. But the interesting thing is that the people, the human beings that she's destroying are the Typhonians. So the humans are associated with Set specifically. They're the ones who are being killed because they're so disobedient and disrespectful, and they, you know, to her father and blah blah blah. And it's specifically they're called the humans are the people of Set, and Set is often called the man of the people. So there's this association between Set and the Set animal and human beings, really. It's a way of saying this is your inner character. This is what you're like. You're all kind of mixed up. You're a mixture of, you're a bit of a dog, you know, a bit of canine in us, you know, kind of all the qualities that they have, you know, kind of.
Yeah, a bit sneaky, like a snake.
What they love, you know, they kind of, yeah, this cunning and all the rest. And then you've got a bit of this kind of hippo type stuff and whatever, and you've got sort of arrows in you because people have been trying to shoot arrows at you and all this sort of stuff. So I think that's what what it's getting at, really. Sometimes it does look much more like a dog than others. So it's mainly canine, but I think that's what it is. You know, that's what it's referring to. It's but I say that's just my particular theory, and it's
that actually makes sense to me because we are like exactly like what you're saying. So maybe he's meant to be there like a psychological mirror for us to look at ourselves, but we don't want to. Nobody likes looking at themselves or their dark sides.
Or, you know, the human side. As I say, we're kind of a bit monstrous in, as I say, in lots of ways. I think it happens in other mythologies that you get entities like Shiva, who's often compared with Set, who's got this. He's psychological, he's not this. He's not someone you necessarily want to bring home to show your parents or whatever, because he's a bit too. he's kind of a bit too wild, isn't he? Or at least, yeah. I read another thing today, a good thing on the internet, saying about and he's too into meditation. He's so into meditation that the women have to kind of wake him up and say, "Oh, stop doing that,"
Working on yourself, which is what he's trying to get us to do.
Change, which is what they do. He's in this trance, and he just, whatever he gets into, goes too far. So it's up to the goddesses to come along, or the women to come along and snap him out of it, really, and say, chill out a bit or whatever, or do something else. And but he doesn't represent the ideal husband or father or anything. It's just purely psychological. It's our deep inner mess, really, I suppose. No, I mean, it's our, the demonic side. That's the other thing. It's demonic, but in pagan point of view, the demonic it's often your best bit. It's the demon within. It's often your best part of you. It's kind of it's the most creative and crazy thing, within certain things. And that's why they say before, don't go casting out demons. You might just cast out your best bit. Exactly. Just be nothing. What will you be? You'll be this sort of bland, with nothing, no inner life, no kind of creativity and all the rest. You need this counterpoint to you. And I think that's what they're getting at, really, with Seth. And lots of it, there's a few other things, obviously. It's very, very complicated, interesting entity, which is why it's sort of I think it is sort of taking over the world. Since the 1960s, the growth of interest in this side of things is notable, I think. And rightly so, because it is also it's dealing with the most important bits, or it's dealing with things that are important to think about, which is or even the question of the problem of evil, why people do bad things, what's going on in their heads, and what is who came up with it, where did evil, because it is kind of a mystery, isn't it, why people do the terrible things that they do.
Yes.
For no apparent reason. And we're not the first people to ever kind of think about that. The Egyptians obviously thought about that all the time.
I've been trying to encourage people to think about this, because I like the New Age and everything, but I do find a lot of people are too much into it. It's all love and light, ignore the dark. So I've been, I'm quite against that. I think we need to look at the dark side as well to be balanced. So I've been trying to encourage people to do exactly what you've just been saying for the last couple of years. Where is the evil coming from? Where is the evil in you, or the dark side? I normally say, why are you being like that? Why are other people being like that? We need to contemplate it and look at it so we can learn to understand ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. This would be a very Gurdjieff thing. Was Gurdjieff into that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
He was, wasn't he? He was quite, which is good. I mean, that's the point of doing all the magic and the paganism, is to this obviously just have a good time, and the set again is about having a good time, and pointing out to people that is reasonable for people to have. That's the reason why they're there, is also to have a good time, and for happiness and all, and pleasure and stuff, but also to remind people that there's these issues. There is these issues in the world of how do we live together as a group of people without murdering each other, or whatever it is we do, making
I shouldn't laugh, because it's a terrible thing to do.
Well, it's laughing embarrassment, isn't it?
Yes.
That we find it, after all these years, we find it the biggest issue in a way, is living together as a community without it And that was the case for the Egyptians as well, that they have quite a good system for hundreds and hundreds of years, sometimes 1,000 years, and everybody had food and, you know, a good life and beautiful things around them, and then suddenly it stops. Sometimes because if they want to break it up just because they just want to. You know, that's I've read that people think, well, there's no particular reason why at that stage they kind of broke it all up. They stopped a particular thing. There weren't any pressure, but there's a side, maybe there's a side of human society or human nature that if things are too calm and fixed, people get bored, or they just feel the need to break it up. You know,
well, it becomes mechanical, doesn't it? And then they're not
Yeah.
getting anything from it because it's just a mechanical process, like breathing. You're not really paying attention to what it is you're doing.
Yeah. Well, this is mysterious because then you look back at it and think, well, they had such a good life, you know, why break it up? You know, because but people do tend to go through periods of being dissatisfied for unusual reasons. And then sometimes everything falls apart sooner or later, would be the other kind of lesson that the set is talking about, really, that external things, you know, they have a wonderful society and they're kind of the dominant culture of that region, and it's probably the most liberal and happiest culture in the ancient world. And then, but other people around them, they rise to prominence and decide that they want to stop it. You know, they want their wealth, or they want to rule them in one way, and or sometimes the ecological disaster. That's the other big thing that hits them. All the different things that might happen to us have happened to models in Egyptian. And funny as setting and stuff is all very connected with the people thinking about that, thinking of how they deal with a crisis in one way or another, and you know what a society needs in order to keep functioning and not destroy itself. These are all issues that the Egyptians were obsessed. They talked about it all the time, really. And he always figures in all of that. It's a ultimate. Well, he's a troublemaker, but it's not really to. Maybe it's like the killing of Osiris. Someone has to do it, right? That's part of the cycle. That's the other thing, a pagan point of view. Recognize that there are cycles and of all this, and somebody has to bring these things to a close. Otherwise, it does become stagnant. So
in a shocking way, every time they have to do it the way they close it is got to be, they've got to up the last time they closed it, make it even more dramatic next time.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
I did want to ask you, because some of the pharaohs call themselves after Set, don't they? Like there's, you know, King Pharaoh Seti and such. Like, why would they pick that name?
Well, you tell me. You're right. That's the right question. He can't have been so bad if they could name them. If the family name is not just this, the family name, isn't it? Ramesses and Seti. They kind of alternate names. One generation will be Seti, and the next generation will be Ramesses. The next one will be Seti and then Ramesses. So it's a dynasty, or not a dynasty. It's an ethnic group, I think you'd say. That's one possibility. There's some sort of tribal ethnic group within Egypt, or personality type maybe, that where their family loyalties, if you like, the family religion is to this god Set, which, I say, it's, you've got to get your head around it in a way. Basically, there must. Whereas a lot of you kind of get the idea that everybody in, say, on the other side kind of demonize this, but there's other people. He must have been their ultimate god, really. They're kind of their savior, if you like. Whereas people like Osiris or Horus or wherever is their savior, the other people who probably not so many have Seth is there as a savior, or maybe it was a particular strata of society in one way. But yeah, that was actually a revival, wasn't it? Of I mean, Egyptian culture lasted a long time, and about halfway through, they kind of decided to revive the cult of Seth. Or, you know, maybe those people were already always there, but they were kind of kept low key.
Yeah, maybe they just didn't want him to be forgotten. if he was forgotten, maybe he'd come on.
It's their family religion. It's their tribal religion. They're not going to let it go. Obviously, because of the this is a kind of, it's debated now. People used to think that it existed before, and then suddenly it all went downhill, and people got into Osiris or whatever, and then they kind of suppressed all the Sethian stuff. But even that isn't really true. They know now the Sethian stuff probably was as popular at the end of it as it was at the beginning, but maybe it was never the most popular of the particular sort of cults that existed, but it was always important and always figures in the story somewhere. And if, as I say, if you go back, interesting thing in terms of archaeology now is that you go back right to the beginning of time in Egypt. There were two different tribal groups, two main ones, the followers of Horus and the followers of Seth. And they lived kind of about 50, 60 kilometers apart in their ancient cities. And as they kind of prospered and developed agriculture and all the rest, they gradually got closer and closer to each other. Say, like the game of Monopoly or whatever, they all kind of sort of different tribal groups until one of them gets the kind of upper hand. And I suppose suppresses the other one in one way, or makes them like the underclass in their particular view. And that's really, whether it happened quite like that, that's the kind of ancient. So at some point in the past, an awful lot of people were into the cult of Seth, and they may have had a certain look. You know, this idea about red-haired people or something like that. That's one theory, which is mentioned in the, because, you know, people with red hair are supposed to be like, you know, Sethians are supposed to be like archetypal ginger nuts, really. You know, whatever. I know these are kind of stereotypes, but it's supposed to be, if you look for that in history, this idea that the person with the red hair has a certain temperament in society. You know, I think there's some truth in that. You know, that some of the Sethians have red hair, and they kind of like to drink. They drink too much, and when they drink, they kind of cause trouble. And also, but they either cause trouble or they're kind of into, as I say, into carousing and whatever, not working, you know, having too much, having a good time. So maybe that was the ancient past, if you like, those people. But as it happens at the moment, this ancient citadel of the Sethians on Boss is being re-excavated now. It was excavated. There was nothing there. It's just a lot of bumps in the desert. You know, it's not. You go to Egypt, it's a sort of place you probably wouldn't take much note of compared with the other stuff. But it is actually interesting in terms of if you're a kind of nerdy archaeologist. But they've decided to re-excavate it, so it's like a lost city of these people, the Sethians. And it will be interesting to find. It was interesting the first time around when they discovered how weird they were. I mean, they weren't weird really, but how different they to most Egyptians they were. Life was okay there, I think. But obviously they're going to have to re-excavate that because it was controversial. It was controversial, some of the stuff that they found in about the ancient followers of Seth. So I think they're going to have to, maybe they'll see if they can confirm it, you know, and say if they could find because there's massive cemeteries there, they can find an undisturbed cemetery it would be interesting to see whether the kind of weird social practices that the Settians are supposed to have, like this fact, the weird thing in magic or in mythology is that this sounds a bit brutal, that they're supposed to have decapitated the dead. Yeah. Now, if you think in terms of Egyptian mythology, the thing that you kind of come across all the time in the Orthodox stuff is this fear of decapitation. Obviously, I wouldn't want to be decapitated either, but when you're dead, it doesn't really matter very much. But they have all sorts of spells and everything to kind of stick you back together and all that stuff. So it's obviously an issue. But from a tribal point of view, it's possible that the Settians, this was part of their normal rites of post-mortem rites. You're involved taking the body, rather than mummifying and sticking everybody back together into this sort of statue, their attitude would be to rip it all to bits and chop the head off and put it all in bits everywhere.
But would that not stop them going to the next land, the fields and things like that?
Yeah, well, maybe they didn't believe in that. That's the point. So from their death rituals, right, whereas you say the Osirians were obsessed, it's not clear cut this, right, because you get both, it's a mixed up, are obsessed with turning you into this thing, into this fetish object, turning you into a statue, really, made of stone, where you're indestructible, and somehow or other that's going to kind of get you through to what? Are you going to be reborn in some way, or you're going to be immortal or something? Yeah, there's a belief in that. But then you have another group of people who think, no, that doesn't completely make sense to us. We think just return you to the nature. Yeah, just dismember you, right? This is all the issue of dismemberment. Dismember you and let you just be in bits. And you say, yeah, you think, well, then you're not going to be reborn. And say, well, maybe you're not going to be reborn like that. Or the Settians would say, because this is the other Settian stuff, is that they always, which I like, they always kind of tell you the truth. They do. They kind of, that gets them into trouble, because Seth is always saying, oh, I know the real secret of this particular religion, and not only do I know it, I'm going to tell everybody. And one of the things you could imagine this idea of mummification is not going to do any. It's a con.
Wow, they're like,
and they say you're evil. What an evil thing to say! Evil thing to say. But that Seth has always been accused of knowing the secrets of the gods and for threatening to reveal them. So that means he must know them in the first place, because he's always there, isn't he? They just think, oh, you're not going to tell you what we're going to do. But they can't do that. He always has to be there. There's something for him to do. But I think that tells you something about the psychology of the Settian people, that they probably were a bit down to earth, really. Or they had a slightly different mindset about what happened to you when you died and all this sort of stuff, which got them into, which became, it's not that it got you into trouble, it probably became not very fashionable. The fashionable thing was to this new cult of preservation, where they sort of touch bases. They make a reference to all this decapitation and all the rest, because but it's not fashionable anymore. So maybe in a way they're saying that the Settians are, it's not that they're evil, but they're kind of old-fashioned, right? They've got these kind of weird old views, from the Stone Age.
Kind of like this flat earthers, brown people, round earth. They're kind of being like that, but obviously not about the planet, but about what happens after us, after death, or if we go anywhere else. That's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's something to think about. Yeah, because that would obviously put a a spanner in the works of all the priests of the other gods and the temples trying to say, no, you're going to go on somewhere else if you're good people and pay to be mummified. You will definitely go to your field of heaven or whatever it is. And then Seths people are just being frank and saying, well, no, actually the gods are tricking you. I don't know. Or the priests are tricking you.
Well, and you can see how these things would revive over time. People go through cycles, you know. At the moment, like in our own death cults, we kind of feel probably in Britain, we don't care very much. It all seems, we're all a bit alienated from the kind of the funeral industry and all the rest. It just seems, you know, a bit lacking in anything. That's my view. And I think I detect that in a lot of people. They don't see the point of a lot of the stuff. There's some bits of it that they do. So there's a certain alienation in over this issue of what to do with the death, whether people survive. And I think that's not a new thing. And then it comes back again. People say, oh, well, maybe do it this way again, you know, maybe this old way of approaching the stuff, you know, is. So you say the modern setting might say, oh, don't do all this embalming stuff and everything is all rubbish. Do some sort of natural funeral, in which person is returned to the elements, because that's what happens anyway. You may as well just get on with it, you know, accept it, do the nice rituals and everything like that, but don't do things that are not going to make any difference. But then people say, well, but it's got a kind of magic to it as well, you know. You see how these ideas ebb and flow. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it is like that in Egypt, and so it's certain 100 years or something later, people will say, "Oh, well, we'll go back to this way." So then you get revival of the Settian way of doing things. It never quite goes back to the past, I don't think. But you do get these people. You see, when they built the pyramids, I think about 1,000 years after the pyramids were first built, the Great Pyramid, people were writing in Egypt itself that it was a kind of waste of time. That nobody came back. So there was an expectation that that there was going to kind of, this great king was going to, or wherever it was, people were somehow going to carry on,
resurrect,
influence in some way. And then you got hundreds and hundreds of all the relatives and hangers on, like the whole royal family, all in these great big things. And then in the end, they just stopped. They just let it fall apart. They stopped doing the services. They stopped conserving the stuff, and like people do, you know, and then they wrote about it. Look, they're all kind of mouldering away, these great pyramids. Nobody cares about them anymore. So there's a remarkable. So I think I relate to that. I think that's quite a human condition, really, that we try and do all these things to overcome the end, you know. But it always remains a little bit uncertain. And
well, who does know? Who does know what happens after the end?
You don't really know. And that's the Settian thing. That was really good. All these strange monsters and everything. It's kind of saying, you know, maybe it's not quite as you think it's going to be.
Well, I'm actually on that now. I'm going to bring this to an end, if that's okay.
All right,
I've been talking for a while, but I'd love to do another one sometime. I just want to hold your book up again, everybody.
Oh yeah, good one. Just happens I got that one with me as well. Look at that.
We've got the double two ways. And
yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
Tell everybody your YouTube channel, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. What's your YouTube channel name?
Well, the whole of the YouTube channel is called Morgan Films, actually, but there's a podcast called Egyptian Magic Podcast, which is on YouTube, but it's also on Spotify. I think it might be easier to find it there at least. But the Egyptian Magic Podcast, and I'm kind of telling this story in little steps, really, of how I got into this weird stuff over the years, and also just talk about aspects of Egyptian magic, especially because Seth is very involved with that have interested me. So yeah, I'm doing it slowly and in a personal way. So yeah, come and listen.
Yeah, I'm loving it at the moment. I've got number 3 to listen to after this is downloaded. So thank you very much, Mogg. I look forward to
thank
doing
you.
more, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, good luck with your podcast as well. Sounds great.
So everybody do click over to Mogg's channel and check it out. And thank you all for watching and listening. And may the gods, the old Egyptian gods, walk with us all.
Indeed.
Thank
Sound.
you.